To Know Christ, a television ministry of the Lutheran Church of Peace in Platteville, Wisconsin. Here's your host, Reverend Jeff Pedersen.
Well, today's lesson is titled Naaman and Baptism. When I was younger, I still do, but I used to guide trips, canoe trips, guide groups down the river, and every year I do guide a trip down a river, and the rivers that I have canoed the most are the rivers up in northwestern Wisconsin. And I just love those rivers. You know, some of the rivers would be the Chippewa River, the Flambeau River, the Brewer River, the St. Croix River. I enjoy these rivers. Some of the stretches of these rivers have got some very nice white water to them. But they're very scenic rivers. The water seems very clean. Oh, another one of these rivers I should mention is the Naaman River up by Hayward. And so they're wonderful rivers. It's a fun place to take a group, such as a church group, and together to bond and to canoe down the river. And so that's always the goal, is to get everybody down the river safely. We don't want anybody to drown, for instance, or to have an accident where they hurt themselves. And so there's all kinds of problems that can come up as you guide a group down the river. But one of the things is that if a couple get their canoe off course in one of the whitewater rapids, and if they broadside their canoe with a rock, well, then the force of the water will make them capsize their canoe. And so when this happens, the first thing that you want to do is make sure that they are safe. You always make sure that they have a life jacket on and that you get them to a safe place. And then the next thing is trying to get all of their gear, all the contents that were in the canoe, if you can try to collect all of that. Now here again, you always encourage people to tie all their gear into the canoe, so if it flips, it's all there in waterproof packs. But that's not always the case. Sometimes we're going downstream and we're collecting all kinds of stuff. And then getting the canoe to one of the edges of the river where we can then lift it up and get all the water out of it and get everything back into the canoe and get the people back into the canoe. And once that happens, when everybody's safe and we've retrieved everything that we can retrieve, got the water out of the canoe, get them going, what I always will say is, congratulations, you've just been baptized in the Flambeau River. And so there's always a little bit of laughter with that. And so I think, well, in all the canoe trips that I've taken, I've seen people be baptized in the St. Croix River, people be baptized in the Naaman River, people being baptized in the Flambeau River and the Chippewa River, and I've gone on some other rivers as well. Being baptized. I must say that those rivers up north would be nice rivers to be baptized in. And if somebody was saying, Jeff, today is your baptismal day, I'd say, let's go up to one of those rivers. I'd rather be baptized up there rather than, well, I'm not going to mention a few of the rivers around here where maybe the water isn't so clean. It may not be as pleasant of an experience. And so I mention this because as I think about a man by the name of Naaman, he is the commander of the army of the king of Aram, or in other words, Syria. And so I'm going to read this story. It's from 2 Kings chapter 5, verses 1 through 16. Now Naaman was commander of the army of the king of Aram. He was a great man in the sight of his master and highly regarded because through him the Lord had given victory to Aram. He was a valiant soldier, but he had leprosy. Now bands from Aram had gone out and had taken captive a young girl from Israel, and she served Naaman's wife. She said to her mistress, "If only my master would see the prophet who is in Samaria, he would cure him of his leprosy." Naaman went to his master and told him what the girl from Israel had said. "By all means go," the king of Aram replied. "I will send a letter to the king of Israel." So Naaman left, taking with him 10 talents of silver, 6,000 shekels of gold, and 10 sets of clothing. The letter that he took to the king of Israel read, "With this letter I am sending my servant Naaman to you so that you may cure him of his leprosy." As soon as the king of Israel read the letter, he tore his robes and said, "Am I God? Can I kill and bring back to life? Why does this fellow send someone to me to be cured of his leprosy? See how he is trying to pick a quarrel with me?" When Elisha, the man of God, heard that the king of Israel had torn his robes, he sent him his message. "Why have you torn your robes? Have the man come to me, and he will know that there is a prophet in Israel." So Naaman went with his horses and chariots and stopped at the door of Elisha's house. Elisha sent a messenger to say to him, "Go, wash yourself 7 times in the Jordan, and your flesh will be restored, and you will be cleansed." Now Naaman went away angry and said, "I thought that he would surely come out to me and stand and call on the name of the Lord, his God, wave his hands over the spot, and cure me of my leprosy. Are not Abana and Pharpar, the rivers of Damascus, better than any of the waters of Israel? Couldn't I wash in them and be cleansed?" So he turned and went off in a rage. Naaman's servants went to him and said, "My father, if the prophet had told you to do some great thing, would you not have done it? How much more then, when he tells you, 'Wash and be cleansed'?" So he went down and dipped himself in the Jordan 7 times, as the man of God had told him, and his flesh was restored and became clean like that of a young boy. Then Naaman and his attendants went back to the man of God. He stood before him and said, "Now I know that there is no God in all the world except in Israel. Please accept now a gift from your servant." The prophet answered, "As surely as the Lord lives, whom I serve, I will not accept a thing." And even though Naaman urged him, he refused. Naaman. He was a great man. He was the commander of the Syrian army. I mean, there's really nobody that's more powerful or has a bigger position than him other than maybe the king. How is that for being a powerful person? He's one of the most powerful people in his country, if not the world. And so you think about that. You ever thought about what it would be to be in a position like this? To have power and rank where you command and people don't question what you're saying, you just do. There's one problem that Naaman had, and that he came down with a disease called leprosy. It was a neurological disease that affected your skin and your flesh and eventually led to death. So in other words, here you got this powerful man of Syria who is terminally ill. And that's what this means, is that, Naaman, you are terminally ill. And that's the frustrating thing about life. Sometimes we may feel as if life is a ripoff. You know, we work so hard to get ourselves to a certain place, to say, I now have a good position, I'm making all kinds of money, I've got all the worldly things that I could ever want now. Not only that, but you might now have a good reputation. You're well known. You got life by, the whole world by the tail. But you go into the doctor's office and the doctor says, you've got a terminal illness. Can you imagine how devastating that's got to be? At that point, you're saying life isn't fair. I've gotten myself to this point, and now I just go to the doctor and he tells me I've got a terminal illness. I've only got so long to live. Well, that's Naaman's state. He's terminally ill. And so as we think about being human, we are born, but when we are born, we are tagged with a terminal illness. It's called sin. All have sinned, all fall short of the glory of God. The wages of sin is death. So, as you're born and get your birth certificate, you're also given a death certificate. You've only got a certain amount of time in this world, and that's the way it is for everybody, whether you live 1 day or 100 years. And I've known both. I've had, a couple of funerals for babies that lived 1 day. But maybe that's a good question, that if we were given 1 day to live, let's say that we woke up this morning and somehow we are told that we are given 1 day to live. How would we live that day? It'd be very tempting to say, oh, life is a ripoff. I only have 1 day. Well, that's hardly even worth living. I think I'm just going to spend this whole day complaining, saying, well, this isn't fair. I only have 1 day to live. Or maybe we'll probably try to spend the whole day trying to figure out, well, how can I spend this day trying to figure out how I can live an extra day? But then in that day, being in the same position. Or maybe we'll just say, well, since I only have 1 day, I'm just going to go out. I'm going to go out and get drunk. Or I'm going to go out and gamble whatever resources I have. What's the use? Or maybe I'm going to get back at, or maybe I'm going to harm my neighbor. I'm going to be mean to my wife and my kids. Is this really how we would want to spend the day? If we're only given 1 day to live, wouldn't it be better to say, well, I'm going to make the most out of this day. I'm going to start the day in prayer, saying, God, this is going to be a day that I honor you. This is a day where I know that you have made. I'm going to rejoice in it. I know that you've got good things planned for this day. Maybe there's a job that you want me to do. Maybe it's just going down to the church and doing something as simple as folding bulletins. Or being kind to somebody, giving an encouraging word. And in this day, maybe there are those people that I would like to spend this day with to tell them that I love you, to give them an embrace, that you're special to me and I want to spend this time with you, this time now that is so precious, so valuable. And so maybe that's a good exercise for all of us to say, if we were just given 1 day to live today, this 1 day, how would we live it? And then as we really think about how would be the best way to live this day, then maybe we should think about, this is how I should live all of my days. And so Naaman, here he's got this girl in his midst. She's an Israelite girl. She was captured and is now working as a slave, a mistress for Naaman's wife. And maybe life isn't all that bad for this girl to say, Naaman's wife isn't really all that bad of a person. She's actually pretty nice. She's good to me. Life in Naaman's house is pretty pleasant. And so she says to Naaman's wife, well, I know this prophet. His name is Elisha. And I think that he could heal Naaman. Matter of fact, I'm very confident. I have all the faith in the world that this prophet Elisha, that God can do a mighty work in him, and he is going to be able to save Naaman. At this point, Naaman has nothing to lose. Oh, me being a Syrian, being the commander of the army, Israel's a rival nation. I've gone to battle with them. I don't know if I can humble myself and dare say, well, okay, I want to meet this prophet and to say that it's actually an Israelite of all people that healed me, that God used an Israelite. Boy, that's really crossing the boundaries. That's really showing some humility. But at this point, he's desperate. It's like, what other options do I have? Think about times when you're in a situation. Are you going to be a person of prejudice? Are you going to be discriminating against somebody when this is the person who can help you? You know, that's one of the things about suffering. It seems like it kind of levels the plane, doesn't it? Now we don't care, if this person looks different than me or believes different than me or has different interests than me or lives on the other side of the tracks. We don't care. A person that we may be prejudiced against, all of a sudden now we start saying, hey, now this is my best friend. This is the person that can help me. There's love and compassion that's now being shown. And you know what? That is what overcomes prejudice, pride, and hatred. Say that this is my brother or this is my sister. And we are here to support each other and to help each other, and we're going to glorify God in it. And so Naaman says, okay, let's go for it. Let's go and see about having this prophet come. And so, there's the message from Naaman's king sent to Israel's king. And Israel's king, he seems to be pretty arrogant himself. Well, who do you think I am? God? That I'm able to heal people now? And so for this king, and we're not really sure just who that king was, but it's just like, okay, if you're not going to be part of the solution, just don't add to the problem. And so the king is able to somehow get Naaman, and Naaman just basically said, or Naaman to get Elisha. And Elisha just basically says to Naaman, well, what you need to do, if you want to be healed, is that you've got to go to the Jordan River and dip in it 7 times. In other words, go and be baptized in the Jordan River 7 times. And your leprosy will wash away. Pretty simple. But Naaman, he doesn't like this. It's like, yes, he's humble, he goes to Elisha, but he doesn't like the way that this whole thing is going to take place. Naaman, he wants to do it on his terms. First of all, he gets all of this wealth, the gold and the silver and all these changes of clothes. So I'm going to offer that. In other words, he's saying, I can buy my salvation. I can do that. He also, as the commander of the army, is saying, I can order my salvation. That's the way that I'm used to operating, is that I'm just kind of telling everybody what to do, and they do it. When I say jump, they ask how high on the way up. And so he's not used to being the one to take directions, to take orders. So he feels, well, first of all, I got pride. I want to be healed, but I want you to know that I've given you a lot of wealth. So in other words, it's not like you have anything over me. I have paid for it. And with our human condition of sin, we just think, well, I can just go and buy my salvation. If I put enough money in the offering plate or support enough good causes, I'm sure that God will say, okay, everything is now evened up. You've earned your salvation. Or I think about how many times in our lives where we want to have it done our way. What do you mean? Being baptized in the Jordan River 7 times. I think about what is written in Isaiah chapter 55, verse 9, where the prophet says that as the heaven is above the earth, so is God's intelligence is above my intelligence, and God's ways are above my ways. Yeah, a lot of times it just doesn't make sense, does it? God is calling us to do something and say, oh, that doesn't make any sense. That really seems powerless. I'm going to do it my way. And God, you can certainly understand. I'm going to do it my way, because I got a whole world around me that needs to be impressed. My way. When Jesus arose from the dead, one of his disciples named Thomas, and all the other disciples were all excited, saying, Thomas, we have seen the Lord. Jesus is risen. Thomas says, well, unless I see the marks on his hands, the nail prints of his hands and in the scar on his side, I won't believe. In other words, Thomas is saying, it's going to have to be done on my terms. And think about our sinful pride. How many times it's like, God, it's going to be done my way. It's going to be done according to my schedule. It's going to be done according to how I think. And if it's not done those ways, well, then God's grant. Don't have any time for you. It's got to be all done according to my understanding of things. And don't delay. As if God maybe has a lesson to teach us in it all. So what he was hoping for was, first of all, a lot of fanfare. Well, let's have parades. I'm going to be healed this day, so let's get the whole country involved. We're going to have parades. We're going to have fireworks. And what? Being baptized in the Jordan River? You got to be kidding. The rivers in Syria are far nicer. The rivers of Abana and Pharpar. Where you got the whitewater rapids and the clean water and all the beautiful trees and the eagle flying overhead. Isn't that going to be a lot nicer? Being baptized in a Jordan River, that's being baptized in a swamp. Have you ever seen the Jordan River? Somebody's just like, I agree with you, Naaman. That river is like a slow-moving swamp. Yeah? I have gone swimming in a swamp before. Just below my hometown, there's a river, and there's backwaters that are swamps. And somebody once said to me, Jeff, you've done it all. And it's just like, well, yeah, I have gone swimming in a swamp. And when you can say that you've gone swimming in a swamp, you have done it all. And the swamp smells. There's green algae all over the place. There's turtles and frogs. And when you touch the bottom with your toe, it's all mucky. That's the way the Jordan River is. I've seen the Jordan River. Matter of fact, I even thought about swimming in the Jordan River. I've already been baptized. I'd see a lot of people, the traditional site of where Jesus supposedly was baptized. You see a lot of people getting baptized over there, but I've been baptized, so I don't need to be baptized again. But I thought, maybe I should go swimming in the Jordan River. I can tell everybody, now I've done everything, because I've even gone swimming in the Jordan River. But then as I looked at it, it was like the swamp. It was green junk floating around. It smelled. And my concern was that maybe some black slithering thing is going to come swimming up by me and maybe bite me in the back. So I'm like Naaman. There's got to be better places to swim than this. But Naaman finally, he humbled himself. And he went and he was baptized 7 times in the River Jordan. Why 7 times? Well, the only theological understanding that I'd have is that 7 meant perfection. But otherwise, I don't know. But it's not for us to question. We are to just take a step of faith. If he says it's got to be in the Jordan River 7 times, then that's what we do. That's being obedient to God. And I know that we've got all of our own ways of thinking. I got better ways than you, God. But that's the way God's going to do it. It's going to have to be done on God's terms, otherwise he's not going to be healed. And so finally he does that, and he's cleansed of his leprosy. And then he goes to Naaman and says, "No, I'm offering you all this wealth." And Naaman says, "I don't want any of this wealth." In other words, this is by the grace of God that you are healed. It's by the grace of God that you are saved. And that's the way that it is with us. Jesus Christ died on a cross for us, and he's arisen from the dead. It is Jesus who saves us. But how do we receive this life? Now, I know a lot of you are going to rebel against this, but what we are commanded to do is to be baptized. To be baptized in our Lord Jesus Christ, where we are washed in his blood, because it's Jesus who saves us. Now, and here again, faith comes by hearing and hearing the word of God, but I've heard a lot of people say, well, no, it's not that way. Baptism, it's not flashy enough. It doesn't have enough fireworks to it. What we need to do is have a big assembly where everybody's gathered and we get everybody all excited, and then you come up and you say the sinner's prayer. Let's do it that way. But Jesus said, no. You must be baptized. You must be born again by water and the Spirit. The Apostle Paul writes in Romans chapter 6, verses 4 through 6, where he's talking about that in baptism you're united with Christ's death, burial, and resurrection. It's there that you receive life. It's not water that saves you, but it's water connected with God's Word. It's water being connected with Jesus. That you're drowned out into your old self. That you may be raised up as a new person in Jesus Christ. Water represents life. Water connected with Jesus' death and resurrection, a means, a vehicle of his salvation. Be obedient to Jesus. Be baptized in his name this day. Well, thank you so much for joining me. God bless you.
Those who make a donation to KFXB of $25 or more will receive a copy of Pastor Pedersen's latest book, Christmas Ponderings.